If you're looking for an insane heavy attack build for the Elder Scrolls Online that absolutely melts the faces off your enemies, then you should definitely watch this video. Hey everybody, this is my update for the 1-bar heavy attack Magicka Necromancer. Not only does this do insane damage and have great survivability and self-healing, making it perfect for solo, it also has great utility with off-balance and major vulnerability, making it a great build for groups as well. No trials gear is needed, no bar swapping is required, and a super easy rotation means this is also one of the easiest builds you can play right now in ESO, so let's jump right into it. Alright everybody, here we are back on the Magicka Necro with an updated 1-bar heavy attack build. This build is extremely easy moving into update 37 and beyond in ESO. Tons of damage, super easy rotation. This is going to be amazing for both solo and group content. So let's go ahead and jump right into things and check out the buff stats. Very basic. You can use any potion that you like really. And let me just summon one of our Necro companions, and here we go. So about 30,000 max Magicka, 27,000 max health. That's huge. 18,000 max stamina. Look at our recoveries, all really, really good. Spell damage, weapon damage coming in at about 4,100, 50% crit chance, and decent resistances overall. So just tons and tons of stats on this build. I'm really happy with how that turned out. 64 points, of course, into max Magicka, this being a Magicka-focused Necromancer, though we are using a fair amount of stamina abilities. We'll talk about that in the skills section. As far as the Mundus stone, you will want to run the Thief Mundus for the extra critical chance. You always want to be about over 50% if you can. This is going to help out a lot. Of course, we got tons and tons of buffs on the character sheet. We'll talk about where those come from in just a minute. But our food buff here is going to be Bewitched Sugar Skulls. This just gives a ton of overall stats, including max health, max stamina, max Magicka, and health recovery. You can use something like Witch Mother's Potent Brew for a little bit of extra Magicka recovery, but I feel like you really don't need it on this build. Based on the fact that we're doing so much heavy attacks, your sustain really is no problem, and we have extra recoveries on the Necromancer and as a Khajiit anyways. So going into just pure max stats is definitely a great way to go. I do recommend some sort of tri-stat food though, even if you use just the basic, daily login rewards food, because you will be using stamina on this build for a fair amount of abilities like I mentioned. Now in terms of potions, like I said, totally up to you. I would recommend at least basic max Magicka potions to help you with sustain. You can also have a couple of stamina potions on hand. All of those you can get for free just from killing enemies in the game. If you happen to have it, tri-stat potions obviously will be best in slot. Those will help with all of your recoveries and give you all of your resources back. So those are really good too. And in terms of the race, my favorite option for this build is Khajiit, and a lot of good reasons there. We do have all the base recoveries, so health, Magicka, and stamina recovery bonuses. We do have stat bonuses for all of the main pools, so health, Magicka, and stamina, which is really good. And of course, bonus critical damage and critical healing. This honestly is a perfect fit for the Necromancer class because you have bonus critical chance as enemies get lower health due to your Necromancer passives. And so pairing that with Khajiit, you're going to hit even harder as enemies get in that execute range. So I think it works really well. Of course, I think also any of the damage races are totally fine. High elf, dark elf, whatever you're using, you can make it work. It's not a huge difference either way. So that's the basic setup. Let's jump right into the gear sets next. We'll talk about our first 5-piece set, which is going to be Sergeant's Mail. Now this is still, even in update 37 and moving forward, the best heavy attack set in the game. You can see the 5-piece bonus here. Gives you 645 increased damage for your heavy attacks, stacking up to 4 times. So basically about 2,500 bonus damage on your heavy attacks. With the lightning staff, this is insane. It still buffs the final tick and all of the damage ticks in between. So you get the highest bonus in the game for this. Now, I think it is still balanced because you have to stack it up, right? You're not going to get that bonus right away. You have to have at least 4 stacks active. So you do have to be pretty good in keeping up your heavy attacks. You don't want to let those stacks fall off. The 2 through 4 piece bonuses actually are not that great, but it does go pretty well with the Necromancer, who already gets bonuses to health, We got the health recovery bonus there, which I think pairs well with the Bewitched Sugar Skulls, as well as the Khajiit, recovery passives. So we're getting a lot of health recovery on this build too. So overall, it is just a really great set, and especially if you like the heavy attack, play style, then I definitely recommend you pick this up. You will want the Lightning Staff as your weapon. Precise as the trait, I did use the Flame Damage enchant here, just for a little bit more of the damage through the burning status effect. Then we're using the Heavy Sergeant's Mail Chest, because that is a heavy armor set. It makes more sense to run that as a chest piece. You get the extra armor from that piece. Max Magicka Divine's trait if you can get it, and then 2 pieces on the jewelry. We've got the Sergeant Necklace and the Sergeant Ring. Now you can use weapon damage or spell damage enchants in update 37, because those are giving you both weapon and spell damage. I went with the spell damage glyphs though because of the extra Magicka recovery. So there you go, that is our first 5-piece set. Now combined with that, we'll be running another heavy attack set that I love on this particular build, and that's going to be Noble Duelist. Now this is yet another base game set. Get this from the Crucible dungeon, so you don't need any DLCs to pick up these 2 heavy attack sets. And this one is very strong as well. You can see, gives us weapon and spell damage, a bit of extra stamina recovery, which is actually perfect for this build. We'll talk about why when we look at the skills. And then for the 5-piece bonus here, you can see when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack in melee range, you increase the damage of your lights and heavies by 2110 for 15 seconds. So this is another very strong heavy attack bonus. It's second in terms of power in the game compared to Sergeant's Mail. It's just a little bit less damage, with the fact there that you do need to be in melee range. So if you want to play a pure ranged Necromancer, I will have some alternate gear set options in the written guide for you to check out. But this is actually a melee-focused Necromancer build. Again, we'll see why in the skills section. So this just is perfect. Very easy to stay in melee range on this build and get this huge buff for your heavy attacks. So this is a light armor set. I'm going to be running 5 pieces on the body. We've got the feet, the legs, the hands, the waist, and the shoulders. All Divine's traits on those pieces if you can get it. And then Max Magicka obviously is the enchant. So there you can see we're not running a 2-piece monster set. We have actually 1 piece that we can run. So Slimecraw does make sense here. You do want to push that crit chance as high as possible, as I mentioned. So this is just a great 1-piece bonus. You can run this in light. You could run it in medium for more max stats. You could run it in heavy for more armor. Whatever you want to run there is totally fine. And then, of course, the 1-piece mythic item that pulls this all together is going to be the Oaken Soul Ring. Now, if you don't have this, but you're interested in heavy attack builds, I do have a guide on the YouTube channel, over on my website as well. I'll have that linked in the description. Highly recommend you pick this up because it's very good for heavy attack builds. The main reason for that is it gives you this last buff here called Empower, which is 80% bonus damage to monsters, not players. It's NPCs only, but that's a huge buff to your heavy attack builds. You really want Empower. And if you have Oaken Soul Ring, you have this on 100% of the time, so it's really good. Obviously, we get tons of other buffs besides just Empower. You get Minor Force for more critical damage, Minor Protection for more damage reduction. Major Resolve is your armor buff, so you don't need to run an armor buff. Major Brutality and Sorcery, which Necromancers don't even have a skill for that. You get that for free from the Oaken Soul Ring, and tons of other buffs. So like I said, totally worth picking up this mythic item if you do like the heavy attack playstyle. It makes it so much easier, and with all the buffs that you get from this, it makes your build incredibly powerful. You can do tons of damage very easily with this mythic, so definitely recommend you pick that up. As far as the trait and enchant here, I've gone with Bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty on all our jewelry, by the way, and then still with that spell damage glyph for the extra damage. But that's the setup. So again, we've got Sergeant's Mail, Lightning Staff with the jewelry and 1 piece on the body. Got 5 pieces of the Noble Duelist set on the body. Your 1-piece monster set, ideally Slimecraw for the extra critical chance. And then running the Oaken Soul Mythic Ring. As I mentioned, there are plenty of alternate options, especially when it comes to heavy attack sets. So check out the written guide. I'll have many alternates there if you want to try to use something else. Now that said, let's jump into the very simple skills loadout here. Starting with Stalking Blast Bone. So this is going to be a great AoE damage effect, but it's sort of a filler. It's not our main, damage skill that we're using. Obviously, most of our damage comes from heavy attacks on this build, but we will throw in the Blast Bones every once in a while. This does create a corpse on the ground as well, So we're going to use that to empower our other abilities, which you'll see in a second. That, by the way, comes from Gravelord. That's the second ability here, Stalking Blastbones, the Magicka morph. Second skill, also from Gravelord skill line, is going to be Unnerving Boneyard. And I tend to use this more in solo content, but it is actually very powerful in terms of damage, especially when you use a corpse. When you consume a corpse, you can see you deal 30% more damage with this skill. But the reason why it's great is you also get Major Breach. So that's a armor reduction on all the enemies in the area, about 6k less armor. That means all of your abilities do more damage. They do more true damage, getting to ignore more of that enemy armor. So this is really good just for that reason alone. Next up, another damaging ability from the Gravelord skill line. You can see we have kind of a trend here. Detonating Siphon is your last Gravelord ability. This is a tether. So what you need is you need a corpse on the ground, either from your Stalking Blastbones or from one of the other Necromancer summons. And this does a ton of damage over time. And actually, you can damage more than a single target. Any target that you touch with this beam coming from that corpse does do damage. And I actually went with this morph because of the bonus explosion. So it does some additional disease damage when that siphon ends. So that's really good. The other morph, Mystic Siphon, gives you recovery, I believe. And like you saw in the stats, and since we're a heavy attack build, recovery is really not necessary. So I do recommend this morph, Detonating Siphon, for the extra damage. All right, my favorite Necromancer ability. I've talked about this in other builds, but this really ties things together, you guys, on the heavy attack setup specifically. It's called Ruinous Scythe, and this comes from Bone Tyrant. It's the first skill. We're actually using this stamina morph here. Not really as a damage skill. This doesn't do a ton of damage. We're using it for the on-demand access to this bonus effect here called Off Balance. If you're not familiar with Off Balance, basically it's kind of like a status effect that's applied to a target. It has some interesting things that you can do with it, both through champion points and different abilities. But the main thing with Off Balance is it buffs your heavy attack damage significantly. So when enemies are off balance, you hit them with a heavy attack, you do even more damage, and if it's a regular enemy, you can stun them as well. So this is going to be great for dealing with multiple enemies, trash packs and clearing through dungeons. Hit them with this, set them off balance. You're going to do bonus heavy attack damage right away. You can also see the secondary effects here. You get hemorrhaging status effect, that's even more damage. And you get health, 4k healing back for the first enemy, and an additional 1500 for each additional enemy up to 5. So if you're doing, 6 enemies in a group, that's well over 10,000 healing each cast of this ability. This thing is amazing. And then finally, we have Skeletal Archer here. Now, this is flexible. If you want more damage, Skeletal Archer is definitely the way to go. That comes from the Gravelord skill line. This thing is great. It has a long duration, 20 seconds. And it also creates a corpse on death, so it's going to help us get more damage from Boneyard. It's going to help us more easily cast Detonating Siphon. I would only recommend this really for group content or super easy overland content. If your goal is to do more difficult, like solo arenas, for example, I would swap in a healing skill here, something like Spirit Guardian. Spirit Guardian comes from Living Death. Not only is this a very solid heal over time effect, it also gives you damage reduction. 10% damage reduction actually is really good. So yeah, definitely swap that out as needed based on the situation. I'm going to put Archer on right now just for the extra damage. And then speaking of damage, we have our Necromancer ultimate here, Pestilent Colossus. This thing hits hard, you guys, especially with some of the champion points that we're going to spec into. That's because this ultimate applies major vulnerability. So that's a 10% increase in damage taken by your enemies for a whopping 12 seconds. This is really good, especially when paired with Off Balance. And like I said, one of our champion point nodes, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay, as far as the rotation goes, getting things set up to start with, you want to start with your Skeletal Archer or your Spirit Guardian, making sure that's up. Cast your Blast Bones, your Boneyard, and then as soon as Blast Bones explodes, you can cast your Siphon. So now everything is down and ready. From here, you use your Scythe to proc Off Balance, use your ultimate if it's ready for just tons and tons of damage. From there, you're really just heavy attacking and then recasting your skills in between. So if you have nothing else to cast Blast Bones. If Graveyard is about to expire, recast that. Archer is about to expire, recast that. Make sure you keep doing Blast Bones so you have corpses on the ground. redo your Siphon, Boneyard, and then when off balance is ready, make sure you proc that into your heavy attacks, because that's going to empower all the damage you do. Remember to cast your ultimate when ready. And then again, just using Blast Bones in between when you have nothing else to cast. Checking your dot timers, making sure Boneyard and Skeletal Archer are always up. There you go. All right, let's jump into champion points here quickly. In the green tree, completely up to you. What I usually recommend for slotted stars here is going to be Steed's Blessing, followed by Treasure Hunter, Rationer, and Liquid Efficiency. In the blue tree, we're using Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, and two very important ones actually are in this sub-constellation here. We've got Exploiter, which does 10% bonus damage to off-balance enemies. That's where I was talking about how this ties in really well with casting Ruinous Scythe to proc off-balance instantly to all enemies in the area. Then you can even combine this with your Colossus Ultimate to apply major vulnerability, just stacking tons and tons of bonus damage. And then speaking of bonus damage, your Weapons Expert for any heavy attack build is very recommended. 20% bonus heavy attack damage. Yeah, this is really good. You want to pick this up right away. Finally, in the red tree, mostly what I typically recommend would be like Boundless Vitality for the health, Fortified for the extra armor, Rejuvenation for some extra recovery. And then what I find works really well on this build is Celerity. So this is going to give you 10% movement speed. You might have noticed this if you've played heavy attack builds with the lightning staff before. You kind of are a bit slower as you're channeling that heavy attack, so this does help to kind of offset that, give you some more mobility in combat, which is really nice. So as usual, if you have any questions on the champion points, check out the written guide. I will have that broken down by 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP, so you can see the different breakpoints there and what I recommend at each level. Finally, for the outfit style, if you're curious what this particular look is, this is all light armor. It's going to be the Greymoor style from Western Skyrim. All right, and with that said, that's going to wrap up our updated 1-bar Magicka Necro heavy attack build for the Elder Scrolls Online. If you guys enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, do me a favor and crush that like button. It absolutely helps out the channel and lets YouTube know to share this video with more viewers, so it's much appreciated. If you'd like to see more ESO builds like this, especially focused on heavy attacks, I will have more of those coming out very, very soon, so make sure you're subscribed for that. And if you'd like to support the channel further, we actually have a YouTube membership right here that unlocks tons of great insider perks, like early access to builds, members-only videos, and a members-only Discord. Sounds good to you? Just click on that join button down below for more information. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.